Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for March 26th, 2025. First off today, we will go to abc4.com where it says, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints says it has filed a new application for a controversial temple in Fairview, Texas, after reaching an agreement with the town. On Tuesday, the church released a new rendering of a smaller temple. The initial plans for the temple were released in December of 2023, more than a year after the temple itself was originally announced to be built in Prosper, Texas in October of 2022. Those original plans called for a multi-story 44,000 square foot building. A memorandum from a June 2024 town council meeting in Fairview said the spire of the original temple would have been nearly 174 feet tall. In November of 2024, the church came to an initial agreement for a temple with a smaller spire and a smaller footprint, a building of about 30,000 square feet with a 120 foot tall spire. With the announcement of the newest rendering and application, church spokesperson Sam Penrod told ABC4.com that the latest dimensions of the temple are those that were agreed upon during November's mediation with the town. After the town of Fairview rejected the church's first application, the church and the town reached a mediated agreement for a smaller temple. Church spokesperson Melissa McNeely said in a statement, The town council unanimously endorsed the agreement, but the mayor later called for more concessions. Earlier this month, local representatives of the church sent a letter to Fairview Mayor Henry Lessner and the Fairview Town Council, saying the church's religious rights could be compromised. The letter also hinted at possible legal action if the town's council withdrew its support for compromised plans. After receiving the letter, Lessner previously told ABC4.com that the town had met its commitments after mediation efforts in November, while the church had not done so yet. The church's announcement of the new application came about a week after Lessner initially spoke out against the letter. On Tuesday, McNeely said the mayor had recently expressed his support of the latest agreement and expressed his belief that the town council will stand by its word. We look forward to continuing our association with the community as good neighbors and friends, McNeely said. I've been following this story for quite some time now, and I have not gotten the impression that the church wants to be a good neighbor or a friend. And I'm fairly certain there are quite a few in that community that are going to need a lot of time and a lot of healing to repair their relationships with their Mormon neighbors. Now let's talk about an article that Jana Reese wrote 4 years ago. A few days ago, I was scrolling through my social medias and saw a quote from the article that led me to reading the article and wanting to share portions of it here. She says, leaders of a tiny religion that was about 0.2% of the world's population issued a decree that members of their faith would ever after be known as something else and expected the other 99.8% of the world to immediately and drastically alter the language to accommodate that decree. It's been just over 3 years, remember, this was written in 2021, since Russell M. Nelson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, began insisting that the world purge the word Mormon from its lexicon. In short order, the church overhauled its own social media accounts, changed the name of the historic Mormon Tabernacle Choir to the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, scrubbed the word Mormon from more than 1,000 official books and products, and changed LDS Business College to Ensign College. Yet most outsiders continue to use Mormon. Why? Because it's a single, short, convenient word that functions equally well as either a noun, I'm a Mormon, or an adjective, delicious Mormon funeral potatoes. You still see it in the headlines of all major news media outlets in the United States. In Elder Neil Anderson's October General Conference talk, the name of the church is not negotiable. He says, there will be a few who, hoping to detract from or diminish the seriousness of our mission, will continue to call us Mormons or the Mormon Church. With courtesy, we again ask the fair-minded of the media to honor our desire to be called by our name of nearly 200 years. I'm going to have to interject here. Detract from or diminish the seriousness of our mission? I don't think the word Mormon is what is doing that. Here are some things I think detract from the church's stated mission. Never apologizing or making amends for over 100 years of blatant racism that still exists in black and white in your Keystone Scripture. Hiding the existence of Joseph Smith's multiple First Vision accounts because they aren't faith-promoting, and essentially lying to members for years. Telling women they are valued while simultaneously upholding policies that make them second-class citizens. coercing people over the pulpit in general conference to give money to the church instead of feeding their children, while for years hiding billions of dollars in invested tithing income, teaching LGBTQ people from birth that they are less than because of how they are born, and so many more. The word Mormon really should be the least of your worries. Back to Jana's article, this statement operates from the assumption that anything less than immediate and full compliance with the church's unprecedented 180-degree turnaround is an intentional effort to sabotage the church's mission. It isn't. In fact, it has little to do with the church and everything to do with our readers, viewers, and listeners. It is not the media's job to be a corporate PR firm for any one organization. It is our job to mediate, to serve both the subjects we cover and the consumers who want to know about them. We are always mediating between the institutions we write about and the audiences we serve. And because language doesn't change overnight, those audiences still want information presented with the terminology they know, which is Mormon. Over the last 3 years, I've been checking Google Trends to see if there has been a decrease in searches for Mormon. Search engine history is not a perfect measure of language usage, but it's useful. And yes, we have seen a reduction in searches using the word Mormon in the United States over the last 5 years. What we see from this graph is that, with a few exceptions, when there have been unsettling stories in the news about the church and its members, Mormon appears to be on a downward slope. However, this is not because Latter-day Saint is on the rise. There's been no corresponding uptick of interest in Latter-day Saint. Instead, there's been an apparent overall decrease in searches for anything to do with the church or its members. Ooh, I don't think this is what Nelson thought would happen. Maybe he should have consulted God before laying down the law. Immediate change is unlikely to happen in the press, especially since the church itself was so recently pushing members of the media to promote its I'm a Mormon campaign and its Meet the Mormons movie. Not only does language not stop on a dime, it especially doesn't change quickly when the very organization that was heavily and visibly promoting its members as Mormons in 2014 was by 2018 calling the usage of that term a victory for Satan. That's pretty whiplash-inducing. And this next sentence is the quote that I saw that led me to this article. Mormon has become a Shibboleth, an immediate shorthand for Latter-day Saints to size up one another's obedience and orthodoxy. A more helpful approach would be to think about language in the way that Elder Anderson discusses the restoration of the church near the beginning of his aforementioned talk. He quoted President Nelson in stating that the restoration is a process, not an event. Language, too, is a process and not an event. Change takes time, and whether it is successful is related to whether it fills an organic need. We will watch and see. Okay, so 4 years later, do you think Nelson and his cronies have been successful in scrubbing the word Mormon? Now let's go to MSN.com, where it says, Jesus was not a white, European-looking man. God has no problem with interracial marriage, and Latter-day Saints should intervene when fellow congregants make racist comments. So says a new resource dedicated to the topic of race released this week on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints website and in its Gospel Library app. Tucked under the section titled Topics and Questions, the webpage comes more than a decade after the church's publication of the landmark Race and the Priesthood Gospel Topics essay addressing, among other points, the faith's former racist practices. In many ways, the new offering, titled Race and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, reflects the earlier piece, including withholding a definitive reason for the church's now discarded policy that banned Black Latter-day Saints for more than a century from receiving the priesthood or entering the faith's temples. There is no documented revelation related to the origin of the priesthood and temple restriction, the new article states. It was instituted under then-church leader Brigham Young in 1852 and removed by a successor, Spencer W. Kimball, in 1978. It does not own Black Latter-day Saint Marquita Elliott of Lehi lamented the fact that blacks were denied entrance to the temple due to racism. At the same time, both resources disavow a once common argument that dark skin is an indication of God's judgment. I have to interject here and remind everyone what the definition of disavow is. Disavow means to deny any responsibility or support for. This essay is the church taking no responsibility for the racism that they have perpetuated. Disavow does not mean they are sorry. Disavow is not an apology. Disavow is not amends. Disavow is a cop-out. Disavow is pretending like it didn't happen. Back to the article. The latest piece does so in particularly swift fashion, answering the question, Is dark skin a curse or sign of divine disfavor? With a simple no. Said Black Latter-day Saint LaShawn Williams of Orem, "That was the best full stop I've ever seen the church do, and I want more of it." Here's what the new release says about whether Latter-day Saints teach that Jesus was white, as is sometimes depicted in church art. No, Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem to a Jewish woman and raised in Nazareth. I hate the phrase sometimes depicted in church art. If you are an artist and your art has been approved by the highest of church leaders and featured in church publications, I would be cautious because you will get thrown under the bus for depicting things in the way the church taught you to when they are forced into situations such as this one. They did the same thing with church artists who depicted Joseph Smith translating the plates by looking at them instead of staring at a rock and a hat. The article goes on to say, white supremacy. White supremacist attitudes are morally wrong and sinful, and we condemn them. Church members who promote or pursue a white culture or white supremacy agenda are not in harmony with the teachings of the church. Book of Mormon verses to God cursing the unrighteous with the skin of blackness. The nature and appearance of this mark are not fully understood. Latter-day Saints are blessed as they heed the Book of Mormon's repeated warnings against pride and embrace its teachings that all are alike unto God. I personally find this weird because those doctrines were fully understood when Spencer W. Kimball said over the pulpit in General Conference in October of 1960, referring to a young person of color who had joined the church with her family, and I quote, "The little member girl, 16, sitting between the dark father and mother, and it was evident she was several shades lighter than her parents. These young members of the church are changing to whiteness and a lightsomeness." Next in the article, interracial marriage. The church does not teach that mixed-race marriages are wrong and does not discourage interracial marriage. The manual from my eternal marriage class that I took at BYU, Idaho, would beg to differ. Overall, these and other answers have left some Black members feeling ambivalent. As a Black woman in the church raising a Black family, Cedar Hills resident Vanessa Bonner said, "This article brings up many emotions, some validating, some frustrating, and some that leave me wanting more." On the one hand, Bonner said she appreciates the church's disavowal of past theories used to justify racial restrictions. She explained, "For many Black members, especially converts like myself, it is necessary to hear that those explanations were not doctrinal and that the church is striving to align more fully with the gospel's teachings of love and unity." Sadly, if you read Matt Harris's book, Second Class Saints, you will see that race restrictions were in fact doctrinal. Then again, Bonner said, the new essay missed a critical opportunity to center the lived experience of Black members. The webpage quotes from 3 Black Latter-day Saint leaders. Among them is former Area 70 Tony Parker on the need to address instances of racism directly with the individual at fault. "If someone says something to hurt my feelings," he said, "I need to find a way to help him understand why that hurt." Nonetheless, Bonner said, the resource could have gone further to fully address the challenges Black families still face within the church and provide specifics about how members can support Black members in meaningful ways beyond simply stating, "We are all children of God." Places where the church could begin include, she suggested, highlighting the importance of Black voices in leadership, culturally inclusive resources, or the unique spiritual and social experiences of Black Latter-day Saints. LaShawn Williams expressed a similar frustration. As a mental health clinician who has worked with many Black Latter-day Saints, she was particularly disappointed in the answer to the question, "Are church members and leaders racist?" This should have been a hard yes, the president of the Mormon Mental Health Association said, citing the racist sludge her family and clients have faced through the years at the hands of fellow church members. The sooner folks admit that they are or have benefited from anti-Black racism with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, she said, the sooner we can heal this part of the body of Christ. And now I want to mention something a little more personal. For years, I have been reading news about Mormons regularly. I signed up for a Google alert to send Mormon news to my inbox so I could stay informed. I realized it was helping me further deconstruct, along with therapy, books, understanding friends, and so many amazing podcasts. So one morning on my fledgling TikTok channel, I decided to read some of the news and share my feelings about it. And people liked it quite a lot. So I kept doing it. Then someone suggested I branch out to YouTube and Spotify and Facebook, so I did that too. I did not pre-plan any of this. I had absolutely no ambitions to have a huge podcast or be in front of so many people every day talking about Mormonism. I am, in the innermost parts of myself, quite introverted and anxious. I am an overthinker. I'm very sensitive. I don't love public speaking, and I have no official qualifications as a journalist or someone who is certified to share the news. When I read through the articles each morning, connections are made in my brain and in my body, and I sometimes, clumsily so, share those connections here. That is what I see myself doing. On occasion, people come here and they listen and they feel the need to tell me that I should be doing things differently. I read every single comment that is made on my videos, every single one, even if I don't respond. Sometimes I embrace the ideas that people suggest, and other times I don't. I will not ever attempt to be everything for everyone. That is something I did when I was Mormon, and it did not bring me peace or make me happy. It did not benefit me, and it did not benefit those I love. I will speak up for marginalized communities, including LGBTQ people, people of color, drag queens, neurodivergent people, sex workers, differently abled people, and others. If something that I say makes you uncomfortable, my suggestion would be to stay curious about that discomfort and try to understand why it's there. Leaving Mormonism was and continues to be uncomfortable for me. It was my whole life, my culture, my relationships, my beliefs, my spirituality, my faith, my entire way of being. Some parts of my past I have chosen to keep, and others do not fit into my belief system anymore. I am continually analyzing how I show up in the world and reevaluating because I am constantly bombarded with new information. Yesterday, I read a story about a woman who left Mormonism and now makes money on OF. This made quite a few people uncomfortable. I am not going to tell you how to deal with that discomfort, but I will suggest, as I did before, to get curious about it. Quite frequently, when I'm uncomfortable about something that someone else has chosen to do with their life, something that is enriching their life and not harming anyone, I realize that there is another part of my past that I need to deconstruct and fill my present with something more aligned with my values. I'm going to keep showing up here because part of my value system includes being the person that I need for others. If I need something, if something is valuable to me, likely there are others who feel similarly. And on that note, let's finish up with this great quote that says, I started asking my 12-year-old son, "Who did you help today?" instead of asking, "How was school?" He now starts his stories with, "I held the door, helped a friend with math, or asked someone to sit with us at lunch." He now proactively shares how he was helpful at school. And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.